What's weird and wonderful about Missouri? Find out next on City Corner. I'm Steve Potter, and welcome to City Corner. Well, from Pickle Springs to Walt Disney to cashew chicken, it's all in a new book, Missouri, Weird and Wonderful. And please welcome the author, Amanda Doyle. Hi, Amanda. Welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Weird and wonderful. Are those the opposite things?
No, but it's a good way to include a lot of stuff, and maybe you're afraid that someone will object to being called weird, and then you can just say, no, you're in because it's wonderful, not because it's weird.
I think people used to say that about me in high school, weird and wonderful, if I remember
right. That's probably most likely to be weird and wonderful. Is that what?
Amanda, this is a collaboration effort. Are you with a gentleman by the name of Dan Zettwoch?
That's right.
Who is an artist. I think he's at WashU. Tell me about him.
Dan's amazing, and collaboration is very generous in including me in that because it's a very art-filled book, and I feel like the words are, important, but so much secondary to the work he does. So Dan's an illustrator. He's an instructor of illustration at WashU, does tons of crazy graphic passion projects all over town. He's done some exhibits at different institutions around town, and it finally worked for us to get a project going together.
Well, the name really says it, Missouri, Weird and Wonderful. And what you guys did was really kind of scour the state from one border to the next, right?
That's right. We tried to include the entire state full of odd, offbeat, interesting, unusual, undiscovered things.
Well, we have a short video that kind of sets the stage. And before we talk further, why don't we just share that with our audience?
All right.
Missouri Weird and Wonderful is a fast-paced, fact-filled collection of the most fascinating parts of life in our state with a kid's eye point of view. Famous people, sports, history, wildlife, food, inventions, and just plain fun come to vibrant life in these richly illustrated full-color pages. Find out how much Mo you know in Missouri Weird and Wonderful.
Amanda, I was a little surprised because I thought I knew everything about Missouri.
And I thought I did too.
Yeah, were you surprised more than once?
Oh, for sure. Yes. I mean, it's just endless, the kind of stuff you can find out. And you think you know some, a little bit off the beaten path place, and you say it, and people are like, yeah, and then also, did you know this?
Right.
So.
Well, our audience probably got an idea right there by looking at what we just saw, that like on the different pages, you have a certain category, and you'll have 4 or 5 or whatever topics under that category, and that's how we do it. So why don't we go to one of the pages right now?
Sure.
And this is the wildlife page. And just broadly, what's the wildlife page about?
So wildlife is things that are native to or common in the state of Missouri. And this is obviously, you can see there anything from the bald eagles that we all get very excited about. Both Missouri and the Illinois side get excited about that in the winter months. The river otter, which is a huge success story.
Well, let me ask about 3 things in particular then. I want to start with the American black bear. Now, I thought everywhere had a bear. What's so special about bears?
So it is the only bear that's native to Missouri, the American black bear. We have other bears here, but they didn't start here. They've come in interlopers from other places. And they've been useful in our state from the first humans being here. Native people used them for snout to tail, as they say, for fur and for fat and for food. And today they are definitely the largest native mammal that we have here.
I do news on the radio, and I'm pretty sure it was earlier this year, there have been stories over time too, about how they're naturally migrating into populated areas. And I think people in South St. Louis County or Jefferson County are starting to see black bears now, right?
Absolutely, yeah. People are seeing them off their decks out in Wentzville, wandering out of the golf course.
And they're not really dangerous unless you scare them.
They're looking for food, so they're going to come up and look around for food, and then they're going to leave, I think. But yeah, it doesn't mean I want to find one in my backyard.
How about the river otter? I think you talk about their intelligence level.
The river otter, to me, is such a great animal. They're so charismatic. They're very playful. If you've ever seen them at an aquarium, or even sometimes you can see them in the wild, they just seem to always be on the move, up to some kind of antics. And we, at one point, were down to a super small number of them in the state of Missouri. And the Department of Conservation, starting in the early 80s, really put an emphasis on bringing back the population of river otter. And now we have multiple tens of thousands of otters around the state.
Why were they declining? Do people hunt them, or was it just a natural?
I think habitat loss was most of it. So they've really tried to work with property owners to talk about what kind of things. I mean, otters are not going to really eat your crops. So they tried to just talk about things that people can do to make it an otter-friendly place. But
one more thing in the wildlife section I wanted to mention. This is something I've always heard about, and it wasn't until I looked in your book that I kind of realized I didn't know what it was, but it's always been in my brain. The hellbender, which goes by some other names too.
The hellbender is a native salamander, another big success story. Our St. Louis Zoo is actually one of the leading institutions in the world to help conserve and bring back the hellbender, but they have these awesome nicknames, which is why we put them in the book. So they've been called snot otters because they're covered in this kind of viscous goo. Devil dog, I guess if you encounter one and you're frightened by it.
And they breathe through their skin?
They have this like porous kind of skin, and that's why they're covered in slime to protect that skin. And one name that we didn't put in the book because I wanted to keep something to tell people, especially kids when I met them. They also call them the lasagna lizard because they have these frilly kind of gills on the side of their bodies, and it looks like the side of a lasagna noodle.
Makes me think of lizard lasagna, which does not sound good.
No, well, that's why they're protected, so that you won't put them in lasagna.
Let's go see another page. This is famous people, and certainly we've had our share from Missouri. More than most states?
I don't know that more than most states, but we have a lot of people. Of course, we know familiar names that we hear about all the time, but there are some people who really made their mark when they were here, even if they weren't originally from here. And one of those is right there on that page. Laura Ingalls Wilder is a great example. She grew up,
I never read one of her books, but I've known who she is, I guess, my whole life.
She's a cultural figure, right? So all the stories that she writes about in the Little House books happened when she was a girl, living in like what became Wisconsin and that whole territory. But she wrote her books when she had moved to Missouri. She was in her 60s and moved here with her husband.
Right,
and
a small town somewhere.
Mansfield,
right.
And sat down to write her stories. So that's a person, I don't know, people automatically associate her with Missouri because of what they know about her, but she lived here when she was writing those books.
Another one we have to mention is Mark Twain, and I've got a good story about that. Hal Holbrook, who's portrayed Mark Twain for decades. I interviewed him a couple times, had dinner with him even once, and it's just so fascinating. But Mark Twain, what a treasure. And
somebody who's known around the world. That's a person who, there are people in Asia, in Europe, in all these far-flung places who know Mark Twain. And he was, at his time, he was a super well-known international figure, not just for his sort of fiction writing that we remember today and maybe you read in school, but his political commentary and his travel and all of his sort of activism in a way at the time. People know that about him.
Did you ever see Hal Holbrook do his Mark Twain
I've only seen the recorded version. I've never seen it in real life.
That's incredible. One more famous person I want to ask you about, and George Washington Carver. I guess he was born a slave and became a scientist, which I would say is not all that common.
Not all that common, and really had a remarkable life. He was born outside Diamond, Missouri, which is a very small town down in the southwestern part of the state. He was the first African-American person to have a national monument dedicated to his honor, which is in Diamond, Missouri. And from science to botany to poetry to sort of inventions and patents and all these things, he just seemed to be able to do it all and is really an incredible person.
I'm wondering what it was like to, you did this with Dan Zettwoch, who did the art, the illustrations and things. There must have been a lot of planning between you two to coordinate all of this, right?
Some, but a lot of the fun of it was me turning the words over. We collaborated at the beginning. What do we want to include in the book? And we made a massive list, and some things rose to the top, and others were like, well, we'll see if it fits in. But to me, the incredible magic of an illustrator, I handed him the words, and then I would get back and what do you think about this? And he can. They say a picture is worth 1,000 words. When you really see it, the amount of detail that he packs in that's just extra information that I still look through this book and I'm finding things I didn't notice.
It's so much fun.
Yeah.
If ever a good coffee table book, this would be it.
And it's like an I Spy book or a Where's Waldo or something like that. You can just look everywhere and see something interesting.
Let's look at another page, and this is food,
food.
which I think a lot of people would be interested in. And we here in Missouri have some of our own stuff.
Yeah, we. This is foods that are from Missouri or famous in Missouri for some reason. And we've got a little of everything. And that's kind of what we wanted to show.
I want to jump in with one first because I have a personal thing. I went to high school in Springfield, Missouri in the early 70s, and we used to go to G's Restaurant.
Yes. And what did you get there?
They had cashew chicken, which was my favorite. And I remember everybody always talking about, this is Springfield food.
Yeah. And it was created in Springfield. There was a Chinese immigrant there who invented the dish for his restaurant. I think it got popular around Springfield, but you can find cashew chicken on any Chinese American restaurant menu today all over the country.
And you won't believe this, burnt ends. I've always heard of them. I'm not sure I've ever had one. But that's like a Kansas City thing, isn't it?
It's kind of a Kansas City thing, yeah. It's like the kind of fatty brisket ends that they cook them until they're super charred on the outside, if you like that kind of crispy crunch when you first bite in. But it's like barbecue wars anywhere. I'm sure there are people duking it out in Kansas City about who was the first, who's the best, all that kind of stuff.
What is Tiger Stripe ice cream? That's one I've never heard of.
Tiger Stripe.
Is that sports related?
You didn't go to Mizzou, did you?
I did my first year, but...
Well, you weren't paying enough attention to ice cream. So
I was a freshman.
The food science students at the University of Missouri have a working like confectionery and ice cream shop on campus called Buck's Ice Cream Place. And Tiger Stripe is one of the flavors they serve there. It's created at Mizzou.
How can Tiger Stripe be a flavor?
It just looks like a Tiger Stripe. It's not tiger flavored. It's vanilla with a fudge ribbon in it. But you can get it there on campus.
Uh-huh. And any other food items?
Well, of course, we put in things that are just iconic around the state, like throwed rolls from Lambert's.
Uh-huh.
My kids, we drive back and forth on I-55 a lot because we have family in Memphis, and stopping at Lambert's is like my kids' favorite thing, so they can get rolls hurled at you.
I didn't see gooey butter cake, which is my favorite.
I know. Well, we got to see something for the second edition.
All right.
That's the whole thing.
Speaking of second edition, we're going to take a break, and our second edition will be right after this, all right? More of Missouri Weird and Wonderful on City Corner after this.
Hey, boss. Okay?
Yeah, I'm good.
You sure?
I said I'm fine.
Since I was little, it was only like me and my parents.
You think you created family out of characters?
Yeah, of course.
I'm gonna take that, make it into a song.
Put me to bed, see you in the morning. With the frosted Superman, but it wasn't on it. And we lost it. In my head, in my head, in my head. Where you at on the way out? In my head, in my head, in my head.
Hey, son.
Hey, Pop.
You can talk to me.
It's been really, really hard for me. Is it okay to call you Mom? Of course you can.
Visitors and residents love the St. Louis Zoo because it's free. There's a train, a carousel, opportunities to make new friends, and plenty of fun learning experiences with the animals 363 days a year. So come and experience St. Louis.
I'm Steve Potter. Welcome back to City Corner. Missouri, Weird and Wonderful. It's a new book by Amanda Doyle. Dan Zettwoch is the illustrator. And what they've done is picked out things that Missouri's sort of famous for, but they've gone all over the state to find things that are unique to Missouri, either popular here, originated here, or have some kind of interesting story. And before we continue on this, Amanda, I wanted to ask you a couple of things. In the introduction to your book, you make a couple of statements.
Yeah.
And I demand an answer.
Oh my gosh, what did we say?
Okay, I'll tell you.
Okay. What do I have to answer for?
A couple of big claims. You say this is the best book you will ever read in your life.
True. What do you need to know? Okay.
And you also say this book has magic powers. So would you defend both those statements?
My defense is that this is a book we're hoping will appeal to children as well as their adults. And I feel like you have to go in with some bold claims because we're competing against everything else in the world, like the internet. So I'm trying to make this book compelling to pick up. So I think it is the best book. Possibly, it could be the best book they ever read in their life.
And it's just out.
It's just out. And here's what I think is magic about it, honestly. This is a true story. True statement. I think that when you're, like, if you think about when you were a kid, where you live, you have nothing to do with it, really. You're born where you're born. Your parents are making, or whoever's in charge of you is making all your decisions about your life. So when I grew up, I don't know that I thought there was anything necessarily that special about where I lived,
right.
or it just, I want kids to get excited about where they are and think like, man, there's some cool stuff in this state. And maybe we should like go find some more cool stuff.
Yeah, when you grow up, you think other places are cool.
Exactly. And other places are cool, but to not have that feeling about your own place, I think is a loss. So I'm hoping that it'll make people excited about where they live.
Well, besides wildlife and food, there were some smart people here too, people that invented things. And let's take a look at the next page, because you have a page about, or a couple of pages about inventions. Mm-hmm. And does that kind of run the gambit?
Yeah, and this is inventions and firsts. So it could be either things that were created here or first done here, or just the first of its kind that we know about happening in the state.
Okay, what does inventions have to do with Mastodon State Park?
Well, that one's a first. We invented mastodons. No. A really cool thing about Mastodon State Park is it's the location where archaeologists first found what they call a Clovis spear point, which is a certain kind of spear point that people would have had on a wooden spear, directly in contact with mastodon bones.
And so mastodon was a
big kind of elephanty, mammothy kind of creature is what we would relate it to.
It was gone before humans,
today.
right?
That's what they thought. But this was evidence that they had existed at the same time because somebody had hunted that mastodon with that spear point.
Oh, right.
So that was the first tangible evidence that anyone had found in the world of kind of that overlapping timeline, which is pretty amazing.
Well, someone that became of age in the 70s and 80s, I know a lot about cassette tapes and things. So you have a section in this category too about early recordings.
Yes, St. Louis is the location where the oldest still playable recording of a human voice was recorded. It was recorded in 1878. And it was recorded on what they called a foil. It was literally essentially a piece of tinfoil scratched with a stylus. And so it's a voice reading two nursery rhymes. Mary Had a Little Lamb is one of them. And then there's a musical recording as well.
Did I get that right? It's the oldest recording that exists?
The oldest playable recording of an American voice.
Wow.
I'm sure there's probably the oldest playable recording of a German voice or something, but yeah,
right.
But it's the first one that we have in this country of American voice.
Okay, another first, I'm guessing this is a first, not an invention, the balloon race?
Yeah, we had the first international hot air balloon race.
You know, the Forest Park balloon race is one of my favorite things.
Yeah, and it's funny because that's a very popular event to go to now, and I don't know how many people know that we have this really long history. I mean, we have a lot of aviation history here in St. Louis because of our, of our industries that are here, but also ballooning was kind of the original aviation. And in 1907, we had the first international balloon race here, also over Forest Park, as it turns out.
When I think about inventions too, I think of like really scientific things, complicated formulas and science and stuff. But
Test tubes and that kind of thing.
right. But one of the inventions, Missouri inventions that you list, sliced bread.
Okay, you're laughing, but what if you had to go right now and make a sandwich and your bread wasn't sliced, you'd be sad.
How could sliced bread be invented in Missouri?
Before 1928, if you went to the bakery, you bought a loaf of bread, and then you went home and I guess just cut it in half with your hand. I don't know what you did, gnawed it apart. But the first commercially sliced bread that was put on a little thing that went and made it into nice uniform slices, Chillicothe, Missouri.
One other first. This is amazing. The first drive-through restaurant was in Missouri?
That's right. Red's Hamburg. Yes, Red's Giant Hamburg in Springfield, just prior to the 1950s, I think late 40s. And Red, who owned it, actually also had a cattle farm. So he was vertically integrated, as we say now. He had the cows, he had the drive-through where you could get the hamburger. He had the whole thing going on.
Wow. And one more first. I have to get some sports in. The Kansas City Chiefs. I didn't know this. We're in the very first Super Bowl.
Yep, they played against the Packers in 1967.
But they didn't win.
They didn't win. But they were in the first Super Bowl. We just say that part.
Let's go to the next page, and that is landscape. What do you mean by landscape?
So this is really one of my favorite sections of the book. This is any of the natural features that we have in the state of Missouri. And that's something that before I ever moved to Missouri, I really didn't know anything about.
It's not on my radar. And do you know the 4 things here? I've never been to one of them.
Well, you have a lot to do. Come on. What's going on?
I know, I feel bad.
Yeah, so you've never been to, really? Okay, so down in the middle part of the state, we have a lot of really amazing mountains and hiking. There's good hiking everywhere, but Tomsock is the highest point in the state, Tomsock Mountain. And it's a great hike. You can actually, most of the year, there's a waterfall that you can hike down to. But what's interesting about this hike is you start at the top. So you start at the highest point, and then the trail takes you down kind of along the waterfall. You end up down there, and then you have to haul yourself back up.
Wow. And where's that?
So it's down in the Arcadia Valley. So if you drove south and west of St. Louis, you'd be there.
Yeah, down there. Okay. What about the Johnson shut-ins? Now, that I've heard of.
Yeah, same part of the state, actually, the Johnson shut-ins. So shut-ins, for people who don't know, it's like an interior, it's like waterfalls, but they're all shut in by rocks. So it's where water has carved a path through these giant granite rocks. And it's really like Mother Nature's water park. There are little slides, there are lots of fast parts, and then swimming holes, things like that. And Johnson shut-ins is a great place to go and just clamber all over the rocks.
People just kind of vacation there, don't they?
Yeah, and you can just take down like lawn chairs and some sunscreen and a cooler and lie out on a rock all day and get in the water when you get hot.
And I didn't know that Missouri had its own version of the Grand Canyon.
Yeah, the Little Grand Canyon, they call it, is at Grand Gulf State Park.
Never heard of that.
Way southwest in the state as well. And it's the remains
Farther southwest in Springfield?
Yes. It's the remains of an old cave system that kind of collapsed in on itself. So you can stand on the rim and see like where the walls of the cave just all fell down into the bottom. But it's this huge chasm through the earth.
One place in your book that I had been to is the Spring Caves at Merrimack, because that's not too far from St. Louis.
Yeah, Merrimack Park, which is not a state park. This is something I didn't realize until I went there. It's privately held. It's like a privately owned, run for kind of, public benefit, but it's the site of an old foundry because there's a spring there that could have been used to power, machinery. So you can still see the old ironworks there. There's a lot of just like leftover industrial stuff, a huge trout fishing spot.
And what's the confluence?
Confluence, where the Mississippi and the Missouri rivers come together.
Up Alton Way.
Up Alton Way, that's right. And a great little just half-day trip from anywhere, either on the Missouri side or the Illinois side. So much good like wildlife viewing up there, birds, pelicans, all kinds of neat stuff.
Right, the area between the two rivers just north of where they meet.
Yes.
Right.
Yep.
Fantastic area. Let's see what else here. Okay, I mentioned Pickle Springs at the top.
Yes. So
I hate pickle juice, so I'm kind of turned off already.
Pickle Springs is a natural area down by St. Genevieve. It's a really pretty hiking spot, but something very interesting about Pickle Springs is it is the only place in the world where there is this one certain little kind of amphipod, which is a tiny crustacean kind of creature. And there are like thousands of different species of amphipod, but literally the only place in the world this one has ever been found there is it's called the Pickle Springs amphipod. And my husband filed this information in his brain somewhere when we hiked there years ago. And when I started writing this book, I was asking everyone I knew, what's something weird in Missouri that you think? And he said, what about that little thing at Pickle Springs? And I said, I don't know what you're talking about. He's like, remember? And he went back because he keeps everything. He had a little picture he took of the sign that talked about the Pickle Springs amphipod. So
Wow.
There you go. Sometimes you have to listen to people, it turns out.
What's that like?
I don't know.
You do a couple of other things in connection with this book. Some sort of scavenger hunt. What's that about?
Yeah, well, that's actually in the book. At the very back of the book, we have a map of the whole state, a cartoon map drawn by Dan, which is amazing, points out a lot of the things that we talk about. But because his illustrations are so layered and dense, there's a lot that's happening visually that we never talk about in words. So he made a list of 50 extra things that are in the book somewhere. They're like little Easter eggs. So if you get to the end, you can go back through and see if you can find them.
And are you taking this on the road or something with some sort of game show?
Yes, we are. Yes. If there are schools or community organizations that want to host us for a very interactive book talk, we have a game show called Do You Know Mo that has like a podium for a contestant, buzzers, there's prizes, there's wacky hosts. It's a whole thing. So.
And there are so many other topics that we haven't even hit on yet.
There are, but that's we're kind of proud of. We did a sports chapter that does not mention any of our like major league.
I wanted
franchises.
to ask you about that because this seems like not a good recipe. You did a book. you live in St. Louis, but you did a book and didn't mention any local sports.
No, we mentioned some local sports, just not the ones you were looking for. Not the Cardinals or the Blues, because they're great, but nobody needs us to tell them about the Cardinals and the Blues. But if you want to talk about the St. Louis Horseshoe or the International Horseshoe Pitchers Hall of Fame that's just outside St. Louis, that's in there. Or if you want to talk about the birth of the monster truck industry, Hazelwood, Missouri, that's in there too.
Okay, how do we get your book?
Well, I've got one right here. No, it is available at all of your places where you like to buy books. It's available if you go to the website moweird.com. That will get you there, and we will have on our site there'll be an events list of all the places that Dan and I will be if you're interested in getting a signed
Because you'll
copy.
be busy doing that, I bet.
We'll be out doing signings and hanging out and talking to people about the weird, wonderful things in our state.
Well, it's and this is a nice time of year, fall, to like get out and see things. So this would be a good time to do that.
I really hope people do. I hope they look and say, I can't believe that. Let's go look.
Amanda Doyle, it's Missouri Weird and Wonderful with Dan Zettwoch, who's the illustrator. Thank you for being here.
You bet. Always a pleasure.
And we'll see you again sometime.
Thank you.
Okay, it's Weird and Wonderful. We'll see you next time on City Corner.